all that comes of it, the sweet friendships that grow. I say thank you, infinite presence of life, Mother, Father, God. And I let it be so, and so it is.
So it is.
So, welcome to Soul Session at Creative Life Spiritual Center. I'm Jesse Jennings, and we've been doing these since 2017, often, almost always around a theme of equity, diversity, inclusion, embracing the human family, and the work of the science of mind as it's being done by so many interesting people in so many interesting parts of the world. And I cannot wait to share you guys with our viewers. Our guests tonight, Reverend Ogla Silva and Gordon LILLIE, practitioner. He is in Canada. She is in. Where are you right now tonight, Ogla? Are you in Puerto Rico?
Yes, I actually live off a small island off the coast. It's called Vieques, and I'm in Vieques, Puerto Rico.
You're in Vieques, Puerto Rico. Marvelous. Well, I tell you, so we select our speakers for this event. It's a conversation. It's not an interview. It's not a grilling, interrogation kind of a thing. It's a conversation about what's happening in the science of mind world in respect to the topics I mentioned. And your names came up from PJ Gunter, who is a practitioner who knows both of you, and she was your student,
Yes.
and she is watching tonight. We were hoping she would be on screen with us at the beginning to welcome you, but she is in Colorado. She is watching tonight, and I'm sure she'll chime in the chat. But she said, you got to hear these stories. You got to hear these stories about what's happening in the Caribbean. So start telling me these stories, please. I cannot wait.
Well, thank you. First of all,
And I
I
didn't
feel
rehearse. I'm just going to say that. Yeah.
I'm honored and privileged. Consider it a true blessing to be here tonight. And yes, PJ was very excited, and thank you, PJ. Um, well, I think the Caribbean and maybe Spanish-speaking countries, but we'll start with the Caribbean and Cuba. And I'd like my friend, my former student, practitioner, Gordo, to tell us this very interesting story of how this all began. You want to go ahead, Gordo? Did he freeze on us?
It looks like he may have.
Okay, well, just then he can go ahead and chime in. But Gordo had gone to Cuba from Canada, and he was sitting at a table, and he had a Science of Mind textbook. And could you imagine going on vacation with that giant book? Well, he did that. He did that. And he was sitting at a table in the cafeteria. Are you back, Gordo? No. Okay. So he got up, and I think he left the book on the table. And one of the waitresses, her name is Betty, came, and she started looking at the book when kind of hiding, looking at to see what Gordo was reading. Are you back, Gordo? Yeah. Okay, go ahead. I'll pass it on to you so you can share the story of how this all started with the textbook and Betty and
Yeah.
Cuba and.
Can you hear me? I can hear you fine.
Yeah.
I see you.
We
Okay.
can hear you. You're a little jerky. You froze up for a moment, so she started to tell your story. But
All right.
yeah.
I'll start over. I just wanted to introduce myself by saying I was Reverend Ogla was my prac teacher for both years, and PJ Gunter was my classmate for those 2 years. So I'm happy that PJ thought of us and brought up, our names. So I'll start with the story. I'm going to start with the analogy of the seed, the soil, and the plant, as we often do in Science of Mind. So the seed started around 2009. I visited Cuba for the first time on winter vacation. Many Canadians go. I chose a resort that friends of mine were visiting as well, and just for a holiday. And I was new to science of mind, new to philosophy for a few years. So when I traveled, I took a lot of Science of Mind books, nothing electronic. It was all paper. And I visited this resort in Cuba and had my holiday. And on near the last day, I was in the restaurant just having lunch, and I brought a book for lunch, and I got up from the table for some reason. And when I came back, the server, worked there, who was Betty, was just standing looking at my book. And that book, she reminded me, was The Power of Decision by Raymond Charles Barker.
Mm-hmm.
And she just commented, she said, that book is very interesting. Friends of mine, we have a group, we study that kind of thing. And that's a very interesting book. So we chatted a bit, and I gave her the book as a gift. And then I went back to my room and gave her all my books as a gift, because you're in English, of course, but for her, that wasn't a barrier. So that was the seed. And then what I also did after I returned home, I sent additional Science of Mind, some Reiki type of material, some of the healing modalities by book and CD at that time, with other Canadian tourists that were visiting that would take it with them. And then I made subsequent trips to the area. It's in the south of Cuba, Holguin province. So it's not near the capital. So we're starting to supply a lot of this material and other type of support for this group that Betty was leading. We established a correspondence, and sometimes it was financial assistance as well, and did that for a few years. So as we're keeping in touch, and it wasn't electronically, there was no Zoom then, it was letter or visiting. And after a few years, they developed a bit of a study group, and they were really excited about what they were learning, what they were reading. And then subsequent to that, I was able to order on Amazon, I think through CSL at the time, Spanish versions. Like I took a Spanish, the textbook of Science of Mind I purchased and then took down there myself. And so I brought some Spanish material of Science of Mind and other related spiritual readings, and CDs, DVDs, and whatnot. So this started to develop, and kept up that correspondence. So a bit of a following started around these teachings. And so fast forward a few years later, they were asking, they were kind of topping out on all the information I gave them, and they wanted to explore more. And at that time, I think it was around 2011 or 12, I reached out to CSL Global Services, and I contacted Reverend Mark Gilbert at that time. And I said, can you help out? Like, they want to contact someone, they want to have discussion, they want a little bit of mentoring, teaching. Can you put them in touch with someone? And he did. And as a Spanish-speaking minister practitioner, I'm not sure, it wasn't in the United States. I think they were located in South America, if memory serves. But he hooked them up with someone that could have some regular contact and explain the teaching. So by that time, the internet was working a little better. Now you didn't need DVD. You could watch it on your laptop. But just to explain it by way of background, in Cuba, there's no plans, like there's no unlimited use plans. You pay by the hour. So the group was literally gathering in a living room or some space to meet on the internet, to Skype or Zoom, whatever the case may be, with this Spanish-speaking mentor of Science of Mind. So that went on for a few years. And Reverend Gilbert also, through Global Services, mailed some material. You can mail books if it's educational. It kind of gets through, it's not censored or blocked, right? So he sent some Science of Mind material in Spanish language to them to study as well. So that was supported that way. And then I don't want to take too much time, but fast forward a few years later, it's about 2018, I'm taking practitioner training with Reverend Ogla. And she often mentioned how she also taught practitioner training and other courses in both English and Spanish. And then the idea occurred to me, and of course, I don't know how, but we never do know how. I wanted to sponsor Betty, Beatrice is her name, but to take practitioner studies with Reverend Ogla. So the seed is kind of developing, it's growing a bit. Maybe there's some green shoots coming. And Reverend Ogla agreed to, interview and to see what she could do. And but however, the internet connection wasn't reliable enough. She couldn't participate fully like we do normally in Zoom meetings regularly. Between electricity not reliable and the internet connection not reliable, so taking classes like certificated classes that way in the Spanish language wasn't feasible. But I think Reverend Ogla, you can correct me. You did connect with them as well in some of your regular discussion groups as they were able to
Yeah, yeah,
participate, right?
yeah, eventually she was able to take classes online. We just kind of
Mhm,
worked it. I worked with her
mhm,
individually, and she would pop in and do the work on her own, and we would meet
mhm.
together when, because electricity there, like, is a iffy kind of thing.
Yeah,
It's not turn on the light and it will be there. It's sort of
yeah.
you can go 8 hours without electricity, as she's doing today. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
that
so the
was
yeah, yeah,
that was it. How it kind of happened, and then in
yeah,
2020, right in the midst of the pandemic, we traveled to
yeah,
Cuba and we taught foundations in person
yeah. So the
to
last
about 30
20
people. I
people.
remember about
Yeah,
Wow.
it
20,
was quite a
30
good.
people.
I have
Yeah.
a photo of
Wow.
the group if you want to share it, but if I can share.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, I just want to add that so the green shoots are starting to appear, but can't determine what the plant is yet, right? In the science of mind analogy, the seed sprouting, gave it some water through global services. Now, Reverend Ogla's work, in their own earnestness to learn the philosophy because they found it helpful, in just for healing and consciousness and whatever. And so now green shoots are appearing, but we don't know the final form of the plant, if I can keep with
Yeah.
that analogy. So at some point, because the internet was reliable, another idea came to me, some inspiration or word of idea. I thought, well, if you can't take the course, maybe we should go down there in person and teach, well, not myself, but Reverend Ogla, and deliver it that way. And Reverend Ogla agreed, and she arranged to have another practitioner from Mexico assist her. And I just came along, just to come along, but I was not teaching directly. So I helped arrange for Reverend Ogla and Patty's her name, the practitioner, is to start with foundations class.
Hmm.
And Reverend Ogla had some other teaching. So we went down in 2020, and I'll finish the story later. But if I can share it, maybe I'll share a photo. So that's where now it's developing. There was this group of a few dozen students to take the class. So I'm going to share a few photos of that time down in Cuba, foundations class in 2020.
That's
So
awesome. So
yeah,
we're in Talk
so
Studio, not Zoom, but I see a share
yeah,
thing.
it
So
wants me to
that,
share something. So I'm just going to look for my. When I'm not familiar with this particular.
yeah, I'm not either. Let me, while you're doing that, let me text David.
Yeah. Okay. It's not what I want to share. I think the photos will tell a lot, say a lot. That's why I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. We're
Yeah.
eager to see them.
Well,
Yes.
we had a lot of excitement, and we had all kinds of. We were. It almost seemed like we were the celebrities of the town during
Yeah.
that time we were there, and it was. It was just a very special time for me because on some level I thought that maybe I would be teaching uh, science to mind, but they were really teaching me gratitude for whatever they had, and they
Yeah.
have nothing.
They have nothing.
The fire in which and the passion that they received us with was just beyond any words that I could really put and explain. It was almost that fire from heaven that Ernest Holmes talks about when we do our spiritual
Yes.
mind treatment. They have it. They have that. So it was a sometimes you think you're going for something and you're going for something else. And it was really
Yeah.
a rekindling of my own dedication to to support, embrace the teaching, so that it could reach out into those areas that
Ah,
normally are not even considered, right? Because who would
Mhm.
consider, that a book and a hotel created this new group
yeah,
in
Mhm.
it's
a
magical.
country where, yeah, it is. And yeah, uh, that's the group that would show up. Some days we even had more than that. It was, we opened it up for anyone who wanted to join. Even no, there was no, we didn't charge or for the classes or anything, because these people live on a very, very, very limited income, if any at all. It's mostly
Sure.
exchange for
Yeah.
services or products, or anything like that.
Hmm.
Can you see this photo? It shows I'm
Yes.
showing it.
Yeah,
Okay. So I'll
yeah,
just
I
kind of
see it.
narrate a bit and invite Reverend Ogla to share whatever comments. This is day one of foundations class outside the
Wow.
classroom.
How wonderful.
So our Betty, who I mentioned, is to the right of Reverend Ogla here in the center, and at the far left here is Patty, the practitioner assistant, that's assisting Reverend Ogla. So that was the classroom the classroom was in, and I'll just kind of some of the students with Reverend Ogla, and classes and sessions. So Reverend Ogla is starting to teach, and oh, I think I may not have the order here. We moved to a blackboard system later and projectors. So
Uh-huh.
class three, and there's Reverend Ogla head of class four, and that's just the view outside on the street view. Here we're at the resort, and here's a vintage car that you always hear about, a restored 50 something Chevy.
Yeah, you hear that about Cuban cars. I've never been there, but I see all the pictures of the old
Yeah,
Packards and
yeah.
Duesenbergs and
That was a
stuff. Yeah.
taxi, but we didn't use that vehicle for a taxi. And again, the students. And at one point with Betty, there was three generational because her mother took the training, and then I lost my spot. And her daughter was there at the beginning of it as well, correct?
That's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah. So there's Betty and her mother and the rest of the students, and here's a sort of a high level view of the class. And that's myself and Beatrice and Reverend Ogla and Patty, of course. That's photo. And I just want to say at one point, when Reverend Ogla mentioned the spirit, the love in the room, at the very beginning, we're introducing ourselves. And of course, Reverend Ogla is translating for myself. And even though I couldn't understand all the language, there was such that I could understand the spirit in the room, the essence of everything. And it was quite powerful, like love in the room, just by
Hmm.
people telling their stories, why were they there, everything else, right? It was, well, not an energy, but it was a consciousness. And that was fairly powerful for me as well. And so, again, more just everyday teaching, studying. This one is our taxi driver and his wife and son, and Reverend Older and Patty. We would stop at a sugarcane juice bar on the way to class, and remember Reverend Ogla recommending that because it's high, very nutritious,
Yeah.
and high in antioxidants or something. So we'd have our daily sugarcane juice.
Yeah. Well, also that becomes the water source, because the water is unreliable because the water
Uh-huh.
gets turned off. So,
Yeah,
you can get the liquid, so that you don't become dehydrated.
Hmm.
You get
yeah,
the other source, which is either coconut water, or you get this, which is the uh, the water that comes out of the sugar cane. And
yeah.
it's a superfood. It's not like really processed or
Mhm.
anything. So it's not
No,
like, no,
Wow.
it was
Yeah.
processed raw and right there on the spot.
right.
Yeah. I remember.
Oh,
And
great.
so more
And
just,
we still,
you know,
and if I'll just comment, Gordo, we are still sponsoring. His name is Sergio and Evelyn. We also sponsor them.
yeah,
Even they have attended on occasion some of the classes, but because we got to know them, and the little boy at that time was maybe 2 years old, and they didn't have eggs, so there were lots of eggs in the hotel, and Ogla Silva would
yeah,
put eggs in her bag
Good for
and
you.
take
Yeah.
and and take them out to the little boy.
yeah, that was
Snuggle
funny.
eggs. Good. Yes.
At the hotel, at the resort, they have a rule: you're not really supposed to take food out of it, unless
Uh-huh.
you eat in the dining room. And Reverend Ogla, after that first day, would have none of that. So just through her own personality, not force of personality, but in the ministerial way,
Right.
we were just carrying food out, and the staff was helping us and wrapping it. As long as the management didn't see. I remember walking out armful of bananas and pineapples and other things. So every day we got some Ziploc bags that I brought, and sandwich meat and bread and cheese and all those things every day, for not just for these two, this family, but for all the students, right?
Right.
So and we were quite open about it. Reverend Ogla had a way of just getting her way.
Well,
It
when you
wasn't going to
see
be
hungry,
deterred in that
you see,
gentle
yeah.
power, right?
Well, you see hungry people, especially children. It's like,
Yeah,
wait a minute, I'll give up. I will easily and happily give up whatever my portion is, and
yeah,
I'll share it. So
Sure.
that's kind of what we ended up doing.
yeah. And this
You're
is
on a
just
mission
another
from God. Yeah.
scene of class, and a little bit of movement, I think, in this one.
Yeah.
Just some random
Yeah, you
runs.
can't you can't go to the Caribbean and not dance a little bit,
That's right.
Yeah.
Reverend Jesse.
Now
So
I'm going to add to this. We started the first week of foundations class, but we left in March of 2020. So as we got started, then we were ordered out of the country because of COVID and the lockdown.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew, instead of a 2 week stay, our stay was reduced to 1 week. And I had, I was going back to Canada. I knew when my flight was, but we had to abridge everything and shorten. So this is the celebration on the last day. We're having a little, punch, non-alcoholic, of course, and just celebration of the last day. But we had to cut it short because we were ordered out of the country,
Uh-huh.
and the timing. Well, it's divine timing, but it's still
right.
was still
Yeah. Well,
disappointing because
it was
everything
it
was
was quite
planned for
it
well.
was quite an adventure, because we were told the airport would be closing within 24 hours,
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
and here we were teaching, and there was no flight from where we were. So Gordo left to Canada, and my assistant Patilara and myself, we had to find a way to get to Havana, and it became kind of like a movie adventure, which you know, um, divine order all the way. We found someone who would take us, but because we were tourists, we weren't supposed to go onto those roads. So I had to become someone's mother and make sure that I didn't speak, so
Oh,
they would know
wow.
it.
Yeah.
But we
Straight
got
out of
out.
a novel.
Yeah, it was. But we got
Graham
out.
Greene or something. Yeah. Oh, wow.
yeah.
That is phenomenal. That
So
is
just a
just
few more slides and I'm done. And again, this is just a random scene, and this is Reverend Ogla, myself, and Patty. We're standing in front of a Cuban sugarcane field.
uh-huh.
This is the last day, so it's adios at that point. So we cut it short, but now those green shoots are developing into, they're starting to bud, forming not flowers yet, but they're budding.
Mhm.
So, something's coming up. And I don't have any pictures after this, and maybe I'll let Reverend Ogla take it from here. But
Yeah.
now this group, with the start of this this seed in this foundations class and some of the other work, prayer work, and what that was done. They formed themselves. They continued to meet, and they formed themselves into a teaching chapter. Sorry, Betty. I'll let Reverend know. They kept studying together,
Right.
and now the Zoom or the Skype, it's Zoom. The links were better, and you could communicate more. So Reverend Ogla stayed in touch with them to keep learning and on to the classes. So I'll turn it over to Reverend Ogla to explain
Thank you.
how he licensed the first practitioner in the island nation of Cuba.
Thank you, Gordo.
Thank
So
you,
yeah,
Gordo.
we did license Betty. It took a little bit of time and creating new pathways and different options, but we did. She was fully sponsored, and she is a practitioner now. And we supported her to start a study group. So she has a study group, and now we are teach. We have we've taught about 5 classes, maybe 6 classes online. So the students are almost ready to start on the track for practitioners. We've had a lot of maybe setbacks because of the electricity. I'm sure that you've heard,
Oh, yeah.
Cuba has had no electricity, and right now in Badin, where they live, there's no electricity. It'll come on maybe for an hour or so. So it just becomes a little bit more challenging for me to be involved within the Zoom calls and teach. Betty's doing a lot of that, but Cuba, without going into any politics, is in a great place of transformation at this point. So meeting is a little bit more difficult. Internet is challenging. Food is challenging. And that right now, Gordo and I have switched our emphasis from perhaps the support of the sponsoring the teaching to sponsoring food.
Mm-hmm.
Because this group, even if you have money, it's very difficult to find basic things like protein source, some just basic food, just basic food.
Yeah.
So we found a place online, or Gordo, we do shopping online, and someone delivers it to them, and Gordo and I pretty much, I receive some tithes, and we use some of those tithes toward either sending money for whatever internet is available, or to purchase food for this group.
Okay. So before we go any further, and while we still have our peak audience for this,
Yep.
and everybody's attuned to this, I want to get the information from you and ask Reverend Lisa to put it in the Facebook chat where all of this is being simulcast, of how to get funds to you to support this work.
Well, since I'm in Puerto Rico and I'm a territory of the United States, I cannot receive any funds that are geared or
Mm-hmm.
supporting of Cuba. So what we do is we use my beloved brother Gordo,
Uh-huh. In Canada.
but you cannot mention CUBA
Uh-huh.
in any of the writing or anything that you send, because the PayPal or any of the accounts will be frozen and the account will be closed.
I see. Okay.
I just want to mention,
So
Reverend Jesse, is the way it works. If people tithe to Reverend Ogla, and we've had friends from the U.S. tithe through Reverend Ogla to myself to assist, I send the remittances to the Canadian, my credit union here, and it goes
Mm-hmm.
directly to a practitioner, and there's no question about the sanctions or any embargo because it's from Canada.
Right.
So the way it works is I would receive a PayPal, transfer it to my account, and then remit it directly to Cuba. But
Okay.
I had someone that I knew, a U.S. resident, wanted to tithe to support, and by mistake, after I warned her, she put Cuba in the notes for PayPal, and they wouldn't put it through.
Yeah.
They returned the money, and then they questioned me. I had to go through a lot of. So I'm going to put in the best way to contact is my email, and I'll give instructions how to
Okay, perfect.
send it to me.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, long story short, it's all lowercase GLSOM at mymts.net. It's the same address I used for this to receive the link for this meeting. And I also just want to acknowledge quickly, like during between 2020 and now, not just some individual donors from time to time have assisted. Uh, Global Services has assisted. They provide a grant that covers some partial expenses. I assist them with their application every year.
Hmm.
And Global Services from CSL has supported. They sort of what I call rent a space to meet. So that's a cost. And like Reverend Ogla said, it really have to use one internet feed and gather in a group because they can't afford it individually, but you could afford it in a group setting.
Okay.
And also at one point the practitioner council of CSL, they forwarded me the funds to provide a brand new laptop to the group.
Wow, great.
And that was
Gordo,
only a
real
few
quick.
years ago. I just want to acknowledge that
Yeah.
while I
David,
before I
David
forget
is
about it.
asking me to ask you if he can stop the share
Okay.
of the pictures so the people can see you. Okay, good. We're back. You mentioned earlier about educational materials can be sent if they're
Yeah.
marked, but you don't mean from the United States, do you? You mean from Canada?
No, that's Reverend Mark sent them from
From
the U.S.
the U.S.
because
Okay,
yeah,
interesting.
because if it's for educational purposes, it doesn't get waylaid
Okay.
or censored. But then that was a few
But
years ago. I don't know.
there was, yeah, one of the things I've done to send books is there are people that Betty knows that live in the Miami area. So what I do is I send it to Miami, and then those people either when they visit Cuba, they are Cubans that have ability to visit, then they take the books. I recently
Yeah.
sent
I
Betty a
see.
box of Spanish science to my books, and that was how I got it to her, and she received
Okay.
them.
Okay, very good. Because I know there's going to be a lot of interest in giving
Yeah.
support to your
So
work there. So
yeah, what we said mentioned about the food and some things, even if you send cash, which we do because there's a cash cost, and U.S.
sure.
dollars still work there in a roundabout way. Sometimes there's nothing in the store to buy,
Yeah.
and so we have to, like Reverend Ogla explained that delivery method. I sometimes have to rely on the Canadian Tourist Network. If I know someone going down and someone would take something, especially electronic, that you wouldn't want to send, and
Hmm.
that gets through somehow. So make it work that way, and it takes a bit of planning, but spirit is willing. So now this, if I can finish my seed and soil
Please.
analogy, now the shoots are up, the buds have shown themselves, and now the flowers are starting to express themselves in all those different colors, in that sacred geometry, whatever you want to call it. So there's a teaching chapter officially, like it's a CSL teaching chapter, and it's, it has support from Reverend Ogla and others, and also because they're not in an urban area, rural area, sometimes our practitioner has to go to another town to teach in person because people don't have the internet or they don't have a phone or can't afford to use their phone. So some of the teaching is actually mouth to mouth, you know,
Hmm.
that type of thing, and travel by foot or whatever. It's not by foot, but you understand.
Or on the back of a truck, right? On the back of a truck
Yeah,
to get to Havana. I mean,
yeah,
recently she did that. 12-hour trip to teach
Good Lord.
classes in Havana. We've also asked her to pull back because Betty is so high energy, and her consciousness is one in which she knows that this will change, has changed not only her life even
mhm,
though she lives in the middle of you know what's going on in this country, she has been able to change her life. So she will go wherever people
Mhm.
want to hear about, science of mind. Um, but because maybe the stress level or the lack of good food or whatever, she recently had a heart attack,
Oh,
and so she was hospitalized, unable to purchase medicine. So we also had to become involved with the her. You know, Gordo was able to get the medicine that she needed through this market. And just so we I also encourage her that self-care is also part of our teaching.
mm,
Mhm.
We know we got to take care of ourselves so we can go ahead and continue
Yeah.
taking care and teaching
Yeah.
about our philosophy. So,
The other thing about the teaching as well, just in her ministry, we'll call it, to use that word, uh, it's not just in her locality. In Cuba itself, you can receive Zoom, but you can't have a Zoom account because it's
mm,
sanctioned somehow and
mhm.
doesn't work. So she'll use WhatsApp to communicate with other students in the country. So she has like WhatsApp discussion groups only within the nation of Cuba, and people from all over the island participate in that one. And her goal is to one day have some type of workshop or weekend workshop in the capital in Havana, because
Wow,
that's the
sure.
easiest place for people to get to. Even U.S. friends can get there now, I understand, but that's a bit in flux from time to time.
Yeah, it
And
changes from time
it
to time.
changes, yes, but for Cubans, Havana is the best spot to congregate. And
Uh-huh.
she was trying to organize that, and then she did have we'll say, a setback and wasn't able to complete that, unfortunately. But that's the goal. So the teachings now, teaching the next practitioner and licensed
Uh-huh.
practitioner, the third one, the fourth one, and then how it goes from there. So now this plant is sprouting more seeds from the plants. You see the different colors and all its different beauty and expression, and it's still blooming. Like the garden is started with one few seeds, now one book, now there's many plants, the whole garden analogy. And that's what our teaching, to me, that helps me understand how science of mind works, and just everything, the seed, soil, and the plant. And that's really this story, that book, The Power of Decision, sitting on a table just because I happened to sit there and get up from the table, and she happened to work in that area, and just said that book is interesting. Friends and I, we study that kind of thing. We're interested in that kind of thing, and that's now just what you have today. And through all the challenges, the flowers are blooming, they're propagating, they're expanding. And she does say, and I'm heartened by this, there's a real desire to learn and apply this philosophy,
Hmm.
and because it works,
Yeah.
and in consciousness, or in even materially, and that's what keeps me motivated. Not just
Yeah.
because I'm a practitioner myself, but it's just that it's working and people are receiving it and people want to receive it. And there's some limitations by technology and travel and whatnot, but they can be overcome, and they are being overcome slowly but surely. And as Reverend Ogla, uh, as explained, they're speed bumps, but they're not barriers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are ways around. Emma Curtis Hopkins was on Nantucket Island in what year was it? And got a printed
Mhm.
flyer handed to her about a woman named Mary Baker Eddy who was going to be speaking in New Hampshire. She took the ferry to the mainland, went up, heard Mrs. Eddy, and the rest is history. So, I
Mhm.
mean, if that can happen back in the day, where by word of mouth or by printed tract accidentally
Mhm.
being handed to you, then in the cyber world and modern world, we know that we can overcome any obstacles. Well, the two of you are very proud gardeners as well. You should be for what you've facilitated down there. Now, I have a couple of questions.
Go
So
ahead. Yeah.
one of them is, so 2009, you met Betty. Okay. And Betty saw you reading the book and she said, I'm interested in that kind of thing. How did she get interested in that kind of thing before she met you?
I understand that a group of them were studying Reiki and related healing modalities of some type.
Okay.
And in their locale, it's not really a paid, but they would just go around healing their neighbors. If someone was sick at home or in the hospital and needed some kind of, we'll say that type of treatment, uh, for no charge, just to do it,
Hmm.
they would go in wherever it was needed to just heal or try to heal, or what do I say, to give healing uh, work to anyone who needed it.
I
So that,
also
I
know
think that
that,
was the genesis of it, something like that,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
I also know
Okay.
that Betty's mom was also connected with a certain degree. One of the things also is that Cuba and the Caribbean is very connected to spiritual work.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
even though it is different, it's not, it has similarities with metaphysics, but
Mhm.
they were open to, when we're talking about there is one God, that was like that, and it didn't have a specific, like, it was named something, so that kind of like caught their attention. And her mother has always like read from conversations that I had with her metaphysics, and she always had an interest in it. So they were receptive too. That's why they
Hmm.
said, "Hey, I like that kind of stuff." So
Mhm.
Is it Santeria or Candomblé?
yes,
Yeah.
it is
Mhm.
a certain degree of Santeria, and no, that was it. It comes from the origin of the slaves that were brought over, and they hid the practice of, and kind of made it a little bit more accepted with the Christianity, so that they would kind of use it. So Cuba is well, we have it here in Puerto Rico also, but there's that, a lot of that is very connected on a deeper level with certain degrees of metaphysics. So,
Hmm.
Yeah.
if you
So
read
they,
some degree of Santeria, you will see that, wow, that sounds like, some of the
yeah,
things I've read in my new thought books.
I have seen that in
Mhm.
Budun too. So when they read about something like Reiki, then they see a sort of a validation and a
Yeah.
circling back to indigenous healing practices of
Yeah.
the ages.
And the
Exactly,
way I understand
exactly.
it from
The
Betty, yeah, sorry, go ahead, Reverend Oak.
the laying
I
of the
didn't mean to.
hands, the
Uh-huh.
laying of the hands, that energy, that transfer of energy, non-local healing, that kind of thing. That is, as I said, it's not science to mine, but there is those elements of metaphysics from different sources.
Yeah. The other thing that heartens me is also in just, well, speaking from Betty and others, is I think, just to your point, Reverend Jesse, now that you've learned about treatment and scientific mind treatment, it doesn't replace those other modalities you're doing. It adds to it,
Yeah.
right? So they're still
Yeah.
practicing everything, but depends on the need of whoever they're looking after, right? So treatment is a powerful tool, but it's not a replacement tool. It's an addition in the toolbox, so to speak. And deeper understanding of how it works just makes everything work better. She did say to me one time that why it was important or powerful, our philosophy or people learning it, because it gave people a sense of hope. They had
Yeah.
some control over their own circumstance or their own health or healing at that time. And as we all know how that works, they're learning how it works. So there's some, they feel the power of that empowerment, we'll say, of connecting spiritually. So again, that feeds on itself, right?
Yeah.
You see it works. You want to share. You're excited about it, and on it goes. So yeah, and That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it's there was a time in CSL before it was called CSL where it wouldn't have been acceptable to blend practices, and it was pretty much you had
Yeah.
to you had to come down on one side or the other of this. Happily, those days have passed, and
Mhm.
uh, five or 6 years ago, well, I guess right at the start of the pandemic, I
Mhm.
had an online conversation, and I did a presentation for the group in Kingston, Jamaica, the Temple of Light Center for Spiritual Living, Reverend John Scott, and
Mhm.
it was in the form of a service, and I was the speaker at the service online
Mhm.
on Facebook, and the service had elements of Rastafarianism in it, where in this country the service would have had elements of sort of proto Christianity. In other words, our typical Sunday services look sort of Presbyterian except for the message. Theirs was Rastafarian, and it was the most wonderful thing because it's engaging and honoring to the culture that's giving rise to this. It's not this colonial thing that's been brought in from elsewhere that
Right.
replaces everything that's going on and
No,
minimalizes it. But
no.
it so what you're doing to
Right.
to blend all of these practices together, where they're distinct but they're equally honored as valid, is so affirming and healthy
Right.
and progressive. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I had that
Subliminal.
experience
Subliminal.
also. We taught. Gordo also supported me. We taught in Nigeria, and we started a
Mm.
group there also. And it was very interesting how they would connect, science of mind, and then they would also bring in this case, it was it was almost like fundamentalist Christian, but the singing and all the stuff, that was going on behind the scenes was theirs, and yet they were so receptive to, our songs, um, the teaching, and they fell in love with it also. So
Mhm.
there's a combination of honoring their culture and their teaching and their ancestrals, and then bringing in something else. And no, it's
Mhm.
I as a teacher and as a minister with Science of Mind, I would always respect and say that's wonderful, but I want you to know that within my representation of Centers for Spiritual Living, I have to say this is not Science of Mind, but I embrace no, I embrace whatever you're doing and I respect it. But no, just to keep it clear that they don't say, oh, Ogla's teaching something else that's not Science of Mind. So,
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's it. And I like the point both of you have made, that the one practice doesn't supplant all others. Uh,
Mhm.
there was many wonderful prayers said on this earth long before anybody called it spiritual mind treatment, and it all in
amen.
the same dynamic. So
That's
yeah,
it.
no,
Yeah.
this is
If,
this is
Speak it,
phenomenal.
brother. Speak it.
yes.
That's right.
And when you think of a seed, I could have sat in a different part of the restaurant, or I could have went for lunch at a different
you know,
time, or
yeah,
taken a different book, just taken something
yeah,
unrelated to science of mind and just went about my business, right? So
that.
even though there's coincidences, there's no accident. Sorry, that's my thing.
Now, have you written about this? Has this story gone in the magazine or on a blog or okay?
Just
Let me see
you
if I
have it
can help
now.
you with
You
that,
have it
because
now.
this not again, of course, as you just said, not only because of the work that you're doing and who you're doing it with, but the genesis of this thing for others to read about this and realize, keep your wits about you when you're out in public.
Mhm.
Where there used to be a column in Science Mind magazine about 75, 80 years ago. I don't remember what it was called, but it was fiction. Uh,
Mhm.
but realistic fiction, where, for example, a person would be on the train on the way home from work and strike up a conversation with the person sitting next to them who'd had a bad day at the office and hated their job and was all negative about it. And our hero in the story starts giving them this insight about, have you ever considered that your thoughts are creative of your reality? And by the time they get off the train together, the other person has this whole new outlook and stuff. And it's like, and the point of these articles was, notice what's going on around you. Notice how this is how you bring light to the world, is you just offer these insights here and there,
Mhm.
and you never know.
which is perfect for at least what's happening in the world today,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are
Mhm.
disappointed from results of last week. But here we can do that, right? We can be that light torch wherever we go. And
We're
you
gonna,
don't have to start proselytizing on the train or whatnot, but people are going to say, hey, how come you're not unhappy?
yeah,
What's going on with you? Hey, I don't live in Cuba, but these people do have that inside light of no matter what's going on and what we call, right, the world of effect or whatever, that we can still stand in that place of being that which we know is true, that light, that hope, in the midst of whatever's going on. Because it's easy to be whatever you think when things are working in your favor. It's
And that's in
really
any
when we
country, and that's
got
in any
it, it's
country.
it's it's when we really have to practice. I think Ernest Holmes at one point said, it's easy to to teach, right? The hard thing is doing the practice, because we
yeah,
can
that's
all teach.
exactly right. And he said something, and I've seen it quoted like 5 different places in the last week, about how to desert the truth in the hour of need is to indicate that you never really knew the truth, which is kind of ow, but it puts us back to what we the essentials of life. And you're working with people that are concerned with the
And that's your
essentials
book,
of
The
life.
Essential of
And
Books,
that's,
the
yeah, that's
Essential of Learning.
the essential Ernest Holmes. But the essentials of life. I mean, these Cuban people who, as you say, have nothing. Their concerns are essential, vital, crucial, life or death kinds of things. You're
Mhm.
you're getting them
That's right.
food. You're
That's right.
and when we work in kind of upper middle class America with other, or North America, respect to Gordon, with other upper
Mhm.
middle class people, and the concerns are about a retirement portfolio, or uh, how are my investments doing, or this kind of thing. It's This makes you realize the gut level work that the majority of people on this planet are doing
Yeah.
Yeah,
just to get
that's
through each
that's
day. Yeah,
that's exactly. The Maslow's, just the law. We're at the very bottom. They're at survival. But yet they're survival. But yet they're looking at that higher part of the pyramid where they're actually, standing in that place of hope and not
hmm,
just being, in the lower area, just being hopeless. I mean, they're
yeah,
there with hope.
Yeah. And our
yeah,
practitioner, even though was, we'll say, struggling with a few things physically, in that way, uh, Reverend Ogla, again, just like back in the resort and there was need, really emphasized that we need to get some nourishment, like nutrition, to keep her strong, to keep her working and doing this work, right? And then somehow we found this supermarket that night, that same night you were talking about it, and somehow I located it, and it works. I don't know if they're in Canada or domiciled in Mexico. I think anyone could order from there, but I don't know. It's just the
oh, an
way,
online
like I
supermarket.
said,
Uh-huh.
all these coincidences aren't accidents
Yeah,
in the universe. So, and again, that just heartens me because it gives that inner smile, right? How things work and work out, and I just also want to say one other part about the books. Before we went in 2020, Reverend Gilbert, he did email me uh, electronically the Science of Mind text and some other books in Spanish, which I was able to load onto thumb drives.
mm-hmm.
And I took a number of thumb drives down with me, so people were able to have it electronically as well.
Oh,
So
that's
that's another
phenomenal.
way.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, you can't download very much because the internet may not always work, or the cost is prohibitive. So at that time, took thumb drives. So we had that other method of delivering the material.
Mm-hmm. So they basically have very little Wi-Fi. Are they using modems to download?
I don't know. One time
Yeah.
I brought a Wi-Fi booster to use in the room that
Mhm.
seemed to help with the connection.
Yeah.
You know, but
Yeah.
yeah, downloading data and whatnot is a challenge, and
Uh-huh.
it's expensive because you pay sort
Yeah.
of. There's no plans.
Right.
Like there's
Yeah.
not unlimited
Like
use
a la
for 1
carte.
month, or yeah, you pay as you go.
Okay.
So that is a barrier for some, or restriction for some, because they need it for other things. So yeah, that's well, Lisa's back.
So countries other than the United States that have a friendly relationship with Cuba can individuals can visit this group, say from Europe, uh,
Yeah.
South America, you know,
Hmm.
and
Mexico. Yeah.
Mexico. Okay. Yeah. Well, God bless. That's all I can say. And again, we want to support you. So
Hmm.
uh, Lisa has
Email myself,
Gordo's
and I'll
email.
and with questions, and I'll give instructions, because they have to be a bit specific, or else
Yeah.
we'll hit the sanction uh, barrier, and that's just how it is. But we can, but it's not, like I said, it's a speed bump, not a
Mhm.
barrier.
Okay. One last question for you: is the teaching chapter that started? Do they have a presence on the CSL
Hmm.
website? Okay.
Hmm. I'll,
So some
yeah, it's
contact can be
registered.
made
It's
directly there.
registered.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
affiliated and recognized.
Okay. Wonderful. So there's some contact information there too for in
Yes.
country. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
And as I said, you can either contact me or Gordo if you have any difficulties
Hmm.
or challenges.
Well, it has been phenomenal getting to know both of you and spending this too brief time with you tonight. Reverend Lisa, have we comments or questions from online?
There were lots of comments, and most of them were concerned on how to support. And
Good.
so I put in Gordo's email and pinned it. And we'll do the same thing when this goes up on YouTube. We'll put it in there and pin. Reverend Ogla, do you want me to put your email in there, or?
Yeah, I
Yeah, you
would, just in
can,
case I haven't
you
already.
can, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And but as I said, being that I live on a territory or a colony of the United States, I can't really send any money straight to Cuba. I can send it to Gordo, and then that's what I do. I send whatever help, economic help I'm doing to him, and then we send it on to from Canada to Cuba.
Now,
Oh,
how
and
are
I
you
think
doing in Puerto Rico? Because with the hurricane and the earthquake in Cuba, and we're concerned about Cuba, but
Mhm.
Oh, Reverend Jesse, living here or in the world or in anywhere at this point gives you a great opportunity to practice the principles of science of mind. Because if not, I don't know what people do that don't have this
yeah,
to recognize, to move into, to evolve, to expand in consciousness. It's a life as I know it here is can be can be a challenge, but one day after another, and keep keep it real. That's what I say. Keep it real.
well, all honor and all respect to the two of you and to Betty and the tribe.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's thank you, and thank
Well,
you for
thank you so
inviting us
much,
and
and thank
allowing us to
you.
share, allowing me to share.
Yeah, and
Yeah, you're so welcome.
thank you so much, and
Yeah,
thank you for what you do also, and
Yeah.
just stepping outside the box of normalcy, and I really appreciate that. And a shout out to my sister PJ and the
yeah.
fabulous six that are my practitioners that always support me. All those people
Katie
that
Rocks Brigatti
believe.
loves you. She's a minister with
Yeah.
us too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Oh, thank
she's
you.
watching. Yep.
It's all those people that support the dream and stand and stand behind you so you can move forward. Not because you're better or different, but because maybe you speak the language or you're doing what you need to do. So thank you.
Well, if your paths ever, if your flight plan ever includes Houston, Texas, you come see us. Okay, and
Oh,
we will
bless you.
put on
Thank you so
a
much.
feed for you.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great.
Well,
Thank you.
there's